The US national debt is $33.6 trillion. dollars. Unlike your mortgage or your car payment, they have no intention of ever paying that off. Now, to you, that may seem crazy, but for a country, it's actually pretty normal. There's a big difference between people and countries. You and I, we probably plan on retiring at some point. We'll stop having an income, so we can't maintain a debt load forever. But countries, they don't grow old, they have no plans on retiring, and they're always going to be bringing in a revenue. Now, there's lots of good reasons that countries maintain debt, and one of the biggest is actually pretty easy to understand. I'm Mike from Canavan Wealth. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's start by looking at two different graphs. The first is US interest payments. This is the cost of the debt. Years are on the bottom and costs on the left. The debt is how much money we owe. The interest is what that costs us each year. Now, since we're not paying off the debt, we're not making principal payments, interest only. This is very different than your mortgage or car loan. It makes the cost of the debt much less. The second graph is government revenue, or all the money America collects every year. You can see that these two graphs are very similarly shaped. That's because as the size of the economy has grown, so has our revenue, the debt, and its interest. If you take the first graph, interest, and divide it by the second graph, revenue, you get this graph, which is the percentage of our revenue that we spend on maintaining the debt. You can see here in 2000, we spent about 16% of our revenue maintaining the debt. That may seem like a lot, but let me show you what's actually going on. These numbers are all from second quarter 2023. Our revenue was about 4.7 trillion. The debt was at 32.3 trillion, and interest on that debt was about 1 trillion. We spent about 21% of our income on the debt. But if our economy grows at 5%, then next year our revenue could be 4.9 trillion, an increase of 234 billion. However, if our debt and interest stay the same, then the percentage of our revenue that is used to pay interest goes down to 20%. If we did this forever, the percentage of our revenue that we spent on the interest would keep going down. But instead of that, we usually take on new debt. If we wanted to keep the percentage of our revenue constant, we could take on $48 billion of new interest payments. If the interest rates were about 3%, that would be $1.6 trillion in new debt. We'd have revenue of about 4.9 trillion, interest payments of 1 trillion, but new debt of 1.6 trillion that we could spend. We would actually get to spend more money than we collected in revenue. And most importantly, the percentage of our revenue spent on interest didn't increase. It stayed around 21%. This increased amount of spending, about 600 billion in this case, is referred to as deficit spending. We collect about 5 trillion in revenue, but actually get to spend 5.6 trillion through this trick. This seems too good to be true, and it is. That's because I described a year in which interest rates stayed the same, but they don't always do that. And you can back yourself into a very serious situation spending like this. If interest rates go up, then the cost on your entire debt goes up. Even if you kept your debt the same, the cost of your debt goes up. Just a 1% interest rate hike from 3 to 4% would cause the interest to spike from 1 trillion to 1.3 trillion. Now all of a sudden, 26% of the country's revenue. You can't take on new debt and you have all this new cost. You went from going to spend 600 billion extra to having to cut 300 billion, a $900 billion swing. What's happened over the last year? Record-setting interest rate hikes, which has led to a dramatic increase in the cost of our debt, which has set this little trick into a tailspin. Here is a graph of interest rates. You can see they're still very low, but have come up abruptly, and the longer they stay higher, the worse this situation gets. Of course, if interest rates go down, the opposite effect happens. All of a sudden, your debt is cheaper, and you can spend even more money. For the last 40 years, the government has been in a dropping rate environment, and we're able to pile up debt with little cost. But they hit the floor not long ago. Deficit spending is all about finding a balance. Avoid it entirely and you give up decades of increased spending, But go overboard and you can work yourself into a situation where interest rates can cripple your budget. Now, no matter what you or I think, deficit spending is the norm of the developed world. But over the last 40 years, where interest rates have largely just come down, we have worked ourselves into a situation where we are going to have to pay the piper soon. We need to get interest rates back down as quickly as we can and then back ourselves away from the cliff that we've walked up to. We don't necessarily need to pay off the debt. We just have to stop accruing new debt until we get into a situation where we have a little bit more flexibility around interest rates. There's a lot more about this that I didn't get into. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. You should really watch this other video about debt that goes into a lot of those things. You can reach me with questions at mike@canavanwealth.com. I hope this has been informative, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you.